everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Autumn Renee and I am a mom of two. My first child was adopted from foster care and my second child I had biologically. And in this video, I'm going to be sharing my natural childbirth story with my second child. So when I first became pregnant, I knew that I was interested in natural childbirth, but I didn't know a lot about it. I didn't really have any friends or anybody close to me who had done it. My mom had 5 kids and she technically had a natural childbirth with one of them, but it obviously had been a long time. So not really having a lot of resources to pull from, I relied a lot on YouTube videos like this to kind of share with me some tips and some inspiration on how I could have a successful natural childbirth. So I thought maybe this would be a good thing to share with you guys if you were interested in going through this as well. So I did not have the easiest pregnancy or even getting pregnant, and I will definitely share that journey in another video. But towards the end of my pregnancy, I had a lot of maybe Braxton Hicks or just early contractions of early labor. I had them for like 2 weeks prior to my labor actually starting. So basically just like really intense period-like cramps, but very timeable, like every 4 minutes for 2 weeks straight. So that was rough because I could never tell if I was going into labor. I had a couple appointments during those weeks and I was like 2 centimeters dilated, but it never really changed. And I kept just waiting and waiting. And I felt like I was having all of these pre-labor signs because any of you who've been pregnant before know that in that end of the 3rd trimester, you were just like praying for labor. Like you're like begging for that baby to come early, even though it's not good for babies to come early. You were just like ready for it to be over, ready to meet your baby. And, you know, so you just think everything is a sign of you going into labor. But after about 2 weeks of having those contractions on a Saturday, I started having, they were still very like every 4 minutes apart, but they started feeling like they were getting stronger. You know, they still weren't like how I expected contractions to be, like, you know, like world stopping painful. They were still just like really bad period type cramps. But I definitely was having them. They were getting more and more strong. And they went into the night, and around midnight, I felt very confident that they had gotten worse. And so I told Ryan, I was like, you know, I think maybe we should go to the hospital. And I remember I went to the bathroom and I wiped and I saw just like a little bit of blood and I just like freaked out. I was like, we definitely need to go to the hospital. Like, I want to go get checked. I just like, I don't know, I just got nervous. So I remember we called the person we had on standby to come watch Darian, my oldest son. When we went to the hospital, we called them. They weren't answering. So we had to call somebody else, and they finally came over. And then we went to the hospital, and I think we got there around like 1:32. And they were able to get me in pretty right away, and they checked me, and I was at a 3.5 dilated. And so I was like, okay, like, you know, improvement, but unfortunately they don't usually admit you till you're closer to 6. And so even though I was having contractions, they hit me up to like the machine that shows your contractions, and they could see that I was having contractions, so like I wasn't crazy. But because I wasn't so dilated, they were like, well, we're going to monitor you for an hour and then we'll probably send you home. So I was really defeated. I was like, I'm so ready to have this baby. I did not want to go back to work on Monday because I was working up until I went into labor. I am a teacher. And so I was just like, man, I'm just so ready for this to be over. And literally, they come and check me an hour later and I was at a 5.5. So in an hour, I made like huge progress. So I don't know if like my baby was just ready or my body was like, okay, this woman's ready. I don't know. But something happened and I finally progressed. And since I was close enough to a 6, they were like, okay, we're going to admit you. So they did admit me. We went to the labor delivery room. I like texted my mom and was like, oh my gosh, like, you know, baby's coming. You know, so she had to drive into town. She was about 4 hours away from us. So she drove into town so that she could watch Darian for the, you know, the day or two that we're in the hospital with the baby. And so we're in our labor delivery room. Now guys, I was prepared for this natural childbirth. Okay, I'm the person who does the research. I like read all the books. I watched all the videos. I had my big birth plan like all typed out. I had all these things that I was going to try and do. And let me just tell you, births do not go to plan. So when I first got there, the night nurse was on staff and I gave her my birth plan, and on my birth plan I had a whole bunch of things that I wanted, but the main thing which I had previously gotten approved by my OB, who's the person who delivers my baby at this hospital, she said that it was okay for this hospital to do these things. And I had it on there that I didn't want to have a bunch of monitors hooked up to me because I was going naturally. I wanted to be able to move, and I didn't want to have you know, a bunch of people like coaching me or whatever. I just kind of wanted to follow my natural like birthing, preferences or whatever. And, I had a couple things that like, I was like, I don't want to get an epidural, but, I might want to try like birthing in the water and, a birthing ball and like some of these other things. Like I had some like things that I listed that I like wanted to try. And when I got there, they like didn't have any of the stuff that they said they were going to have. They didn't have a birthing ball in the room. The nurse who was there told me that I had to be hooked up to like 4 different things and that she had to check me like every single hour. And I was just so defeated. I remember texting my mom after a couple hours laboring there and being like, oh, I should have done a birthing center. I regret going to the hospital. Like, I feel like they're not supporting my birth plan at all. Like, they're making me do all these things that they said they weren't going to make me do. And so I felt very defeated like that first like few hours I labored there. And then around, I think 6:30 a.m., they came and checked me and I was still at a 5.5. I hadn't progressed at all, even after several hours of going with those every 4-minute contractions. So I was feeling really defeated, really just bummed out about the whole thing. And also that night nurse, she went and gave me like an hour, sorry, we have like a person delivering something in our house. They gave me like an hour lecture about like how I'm gonna want an epidural and this is the process and you should ask for it early and all this stuff. And I just could not believe it. Felt just unsupported, did not feel like they had my best interests or anything like that. And then when they checked me and I was at a 5.5, they told me, well, if you don't progress like within an hour, we're gonna either have to start you on Pitocin or break your water. And I felt like I did not want to do either one of those things because again, I had done my research and I have heard that like if you get Pitocin, the contractions are like way worse and you're way more likely to get an epidural and all this stuff. And then, same thing, I was afraid if they broke my water that I would still not progress and then they'd have to give me Pitocin anyway. And so I just felt like I was like given these 2 choices and didn't really have a path that I wanted. But then at 7 a.m. they had a nurse shift and I got a new nurse and she came in and took one look at my birth plan and was like, why do we have you hooked up to all this stuff? And she unhooked me from everything and gave me a wireless monitor on my baby so that I could move freely and didn't have to have anybody like coming in. It was so nice. I'm still so thankful to her. And so she came in and did that. She got me the birthing ball I asked for. She let me, that was the other thing I forgot. I was nauseous, which I had HG all through pregnancy. So I've been nauseous the whole pregnancy and I was feeling nauseous even in labor. And I was like, can I take my nauseous medication that I had with me that was prescribed to me? And the other nurse wouldn't let me take it. And she was like, I'm gonna have to like run it through the hospital. And she's like, it's gonna take several hours. So she had done that and I still hadn't like gotten any medicine. And so then I asked, that nurse if I could just take one and she was like, oh yeah, sure. So she was so much better. So I was able to take my nausea medication. I was able to have my birthing ball. She unhooked me from all my monitors and then she just let me be, which is what I wanted. Ryan at this point was mostly sleeping and I was just kind of laboring on my own because it wasn't so bad at this point. It just was kind of like bad period cramps and I was just going through, life. So then around 10, I had been laboring all night and they checked me again and I was still at a 5.5. So I had still not progressed at all. So the doctor came in and was like, okay, we have to do something. And so I told them, okay, you can break my water. And so they broke my water, which was not bad at all, by the way. Like I was like really had this built up in my head that them breaking my water was going to be like this huge deal. And it was like nothing. Like I didn't even really feel it. It just was like a little bit of water coming out of me, like nothing, no big deal at all. Did not hurt. Was not scary. So that's totally not a big deal if it has to happen to you. However, what I did not know is once your water breaks, holy crap, you feel those contractions. It's like there was this nice wall that was protecting you, making it feel just like a period cramp. But the moment they broke my water, like the very next contraction was like, oh my gosh, like this is real labor. This is what people talk about. So from that moment onward, I had very painful contractions. I would just like, I imagine them as just like those really awful like diarrhea cramps. Like when you're sitting on the toilet like praying for relief, that's kind of what they felt like. That's like the closest like comparison I can think of. And I know different women, describe contractions different ways, so they could definitely, be different for you. But for me, that's kind of like the closest comparison I can think of. But it was just every 4 minutes of like those really painful contractions. And so at that point, this is where like what I had planned and what was reality did not end up matching up. Because I really thought that I was going to want like Ryan to be like massaging my back and I was going to like want to labor in the water and like listen to like calming music and like I had all this stuff planned. And once like those real contractions started, I did not want to move for anything. Like, oh my gosh, like the idea of moving at all, like even to like go to the bathroom was so painful. Like I did not want to move at all. And so I literally just sat on a birthing ball with my legs spread because I kind of wanted everything to like open up and relax to like get me to progress. And I just was like gripping the edge of the bed every time I had a contraction, and like I would just move like just very slightly, like just barely swaying, because like any other movement above that just made the pain worse. And so I literally was just sitting there gripping the bed, like swaying. Ryan like came and tried to like rub my back, like he wanted to be like sweet and like be involved, but I was like, nope, don't touch me. Like I did not want him anywhere near me. Like it's so funny like how you change when you're in labor. And I remember I put in a podcast, or not a podcast, it was like a meditation for like birthing, and it was a really funny one. Like I don't even have like a specific one to recommend to you guys, but I just had this one like on like a 30-minute loop, and she was like, birthing is easy, birthing is natural, your body was made for this. And I remember just being in my head like cursing her out, like this is not easy, like you lie. But for some reason having it playing it was calming, so I literally just listened to that like on a 20-minute or 30-minute loop. And like was gripping the bed, and I just did that for like several hours. Like I just was like in the zone. There was a couple times I remember that I had to pee, and I like would wait until the contraction was over, and then like I say run, but you know, waddle to the bathroom, go to the bathroom, and then I'd have to have a contraction on the toilet because I'm having them so fast. I had, you know, every like 3-4 minutes. And so I'd have to have one on the toilet, which was so painful. And then I have to walk or waddle back to my birthing ball. And it was like the worst. I mean, really moving was terrible. Like the idea of even like turning the water on and like getting in the bath, like I really thought that I was going to want to labor in the water. And I totally did not want to. And I remember they came in around maybe just a little bit before noon. And they were like, okay, like, you know, you've been laboring for a while, you've been having lots of contractions, because, you know, they could see it on my wireless monitor. And they were like, you know, we want to go ahead and check you and see how much you've progressed. And so I was like, and I remember thinking in my head, like, please God, no. Like the idea of laying down and having to spread my legs and have them check me while I'm having all these horrible contractions just sounded so terrible. But I was like, okay. Like, so I waited until the contraction was over, like got on the bed as fast as I could and was like, check me now. And so they checked me. And I remember they finished the check like just in time for me to like sit up and have another contraction, because I don't know what it is, but something about laying down while you're having contractions, there is nothing more painful. Like it is so much worse. Like it is literally unbearable laying down having a contraction, in my opinion. So I like immediately sat up and like gripped Ryan's hand and was like having another contraction. And then afterwards she told me that she's like, I think you're at a 10. And I remember feeling so relieved, because everybody talks about like natural childbirth, like it's the worst is like transition, which is like when you're trying to like, I think it's when you're going from like a 7 to a 10, like that very end, like the last part of being dilated where you're not quite ready to push. Everybody talks about that being like the most painful, which I agree. But I thought, oh my gosh, I'm at a 10, like I've made it. Like all I have to do is push and this baby is born. Like I did it. And I like felt so like happy, and like I was like so proud of myself. And then she was like, well, I'm going to go and get one person to just double check. And I was like, okay. So I felt like very like, I got this, like we can do it. And this other nurse came in, and then I had to get checked again. And she was like, oh, you're at an 8. And I was like, oh my God. Like I felt so defeated, because I just thought that I was at a 10. And now I was like, oh, you're back at an 8. And I'm just like, I was like ready to be done. And so she was like, well, just do it for like another hour and I'll come back and check you. And I was like, okay. So I tried to like psych myself back up, like, okay, I can do this for another hour. Like, man, giving birth naturally really is just like a mental game. Like you just have to be in the zone. So like at that point, again, moving was the worst. I didn't even want to try to get back on the birthing ball. Like I did not want to move. So at that point I just committed to like being like sitting in the bed, and I just had Ryan's hand. And this was for me like the most painful part of labor, was like this last dilating, when you're not quite pushing yet, and you have been in labor for so long, you're so tired. And this was like the roughest part for me. But at this point, I actually think that first nurse ended up helping me, because I remember thinking at this point in labor, like the process of getting an epidural that she had described so in detail. And I thought, oh my God, the idea of like turning over and having to stay still while somebody puts a needle in my back. Like there was nothing that sounded worse at that time. So like, even though like I was wishing I had pain relief, the idea of getting that pain relief was worse than the actual pain itself, if that makes sense. So I think it actually helped me be successful in having a natural childbirth, was like having that process explained to me. Kind of funny. But anyway, so I labored for like another hour and a half. They came back and checked me, and I was at a 9.5. And she was like, oh, great, you know, I'll come back in like 30 minutes. And so I like labored for another 30 minutes. Again, this was so painful. She came back and I was still at a 9.5. And she was like, do you want me to like give you some tips? I know your birth plan said. And at this point, I was like, birth plan out the window. I was like, give me everything you got. Like, I am ready to be done. And so she had me lay on my side with a peanut ball in between my knees. And she said that can kind of help get that last like 1/2 centimeter dilation. So I did that, gripping Ryan's hand. It was very, very painful to be laying down, especially on my side like that. But I did it because I was hoping, you know, I just do this for like 30 minutes and then, you know, I can hopefully push and have my baby. And so I did that. She came back and checked me. I was still at a 9.5. I felt like I was at a 9.5 for like years. And so then she was like, there's one more position we can try. And I was like, yes, please give me anything. And so she like lowered the bed where it was like, she kind of made it like a chair. So I was like sitting on the top and like the other half of the bed like lowered down where my feet could lay on it. And then she had me put my knees together and my feet out, which was a super weird position to be like laboring in. Like it felt like I would be closing myself. Like it didn't feel like that would be a position you would want to be in. But she said that like, she claimed it was like a miracle position and whatever. So I did it. It was very, very, very painful. It was not a fun position to labor in. But after that, I was at the 10. So that did get me that last 1/2 centimeter. So, you know, if you're someone who gets stuck like I did in that 9.5 centimeter range, you might try it. Because at that point, I don't know about you, but I was ready to try anything. So at that point, I was at a 10. Now, from everything I had read and watched about pushing, everybody had described like, you'll just feel this natural urge to push and just, you know, follow your body's natural instincts. I never felt that. I never got like an urge to push. Like even like when my baby was actually born, like I just never felt that. So if you don't feel that, you know, you're not alone. But basically she just told me like, when you have a contraction, just push as hard as you can. And I was like, okay. And so I did. You literally felt like I used every ounce of energy, which keep in mind, I had been up for like 48 hours at this point because I was up all the day before, all night long. And it was like the afternoon the next day. So I was so tired and had like no energy from like having contractions all that time. But I was just pushing. And I remember the nurse like was like putting her finger like in me, like showing me like, this is where you need to push, and which really felt awkward, but I just, you know, was focusing on pushing. And one thing that I was surprised, I don't know why, but I kind of thought that contractions would like die down during the pushing stage. But no, definitely not. You definitely are still having painful contractions during that whole time. I don't know why I thought that, but I did. Not true. So anyway, I was pushing, and she was telling me that my baby was like turtling. Like he was like coming down and then going back up. Like I'd push and he'd go down and then I'd stop pushing and he'd go back up, which was really, really defeating to hear. I was like, please, like I just need this baby to be born. And I don't actually know how long I pushed for because I remember like checking the time around like 12:45 at some point. And then I had him at 3:30. So I feel like I pushed, but like there was also still some laboring in there. So I feel like I pushed for like maybe an hour, hour and a half, maybe up to 2 hours. It was definitely not short. I really thought that I was going to be the kind of person that would have like 3 or 4 pushes and my baby would be born, but no, did not happen that way. Anyway, so was pushing, wasn't having a lot of progress. And then the actual like doctor came in and she was like the on-call OB because it was the weekend, so my OB wasn't there. And she was awesome. She came in and was like, okay, we're going to start counting. She's like, when you have a contraction, you're going to push. We're going to count to 10 and you're going to push that whole time. Then you're going to take a deep breath and you're going to push again. And we're going to count to 10 and you take a deep breath and you're going to do it one more time. So basically she wanted me to have 3 good long pushes each contraction. And again, I was ready to try anything. I was so ready for that baby born. I didn't even care about the pain at this point. I was just like, get this baby out of me. I just want him born. And so I was just gripping Ryan's hand. Ryan's hand was like bruised and purple at the end of this. I felt so bad. Like he kept trying to like switch positions or switch hands, but I was like, nope, this hand, this position, no changing. But that was his like one sacrifice to the birth. So it's fine. But, I was gripping his hand and just pushing as hard as I could. Oh my gosh, it hurt so bad, but I was just pushing and pushing. And I remember at one point, like I felt like I've been pushing forever. And I was like, please tell me I have made some progress. I was like, I need you to tell me he's not turtling anymore. And she was like, yes, I can see his head. She's like, you're making progress. Keep going. I was like, okay. And so I felt really like, it reinvigorated knowing that they could see his head. So I just kept pushing. And then I remember I had this moment where I literally, oh, by the way, I had my eyes closed during like most of this labor. Like from the time they broke my water until he was born, for the most part, my eyes were closed because I was in the zone, focusing, like pushing. I just had my eyes like closed and like squeezing hands. So yeah, I just did not have my eyes open for the majority of this whole thing. And so I remember I had my eyes closed and suddenly I felt like the doctor had shoved her hands inside me and was like messing around in there with the baby. That's what it felt like. And I was like, I remember I stopped pushing and was like, what the hell is going on? Like I opened my eyes and I was like, what is happening? And she was like, she did not have her hands in me at all. She was just like, that's the ring of fire. She's like, you have to keep pushing. Don't stop pushing. Because his head was like coming out. Some people describe that as like a burning sensation. It didn't really feel burning to me. It felt like she had like stretched her hands inside me. So I just trusted her and I was like, okay, I feel like I'm gonna like split in two, but I'll just push. And so I did, I pushed and I felt his head come out. And usually, you know, when once a baby's head comes out, the rest of them just kind of follows. But in this case, again, I had my eyes closed again at this point. And I remember they asked me if I wanted to touch his head and I was like, nope, just birth him, like just get him out of me. Like I did not even like have an interest in that at that point. But his head had come out and I felt his legs like still in me, like, and he was like kicking. And I was like, get him out. Like I was like, I could feel his like kicking inside me, which is super uncomfortable. It felt like I was giving birth to an alien. And I was like, please, like get him out. I didn't know what was happening because my eyes were closed. But later Ryan told me what had happened was when they got his head out, like they could see the cord was like, the umbilical cord was all wrapped around him, like his neck, his arms, his legs. The poor baby was like mummified in my umbilical cord. And so they got him out and were like trying to unwrap him and bring him out of me, which is why his legs were still in me. But they did eventually get him out. And I remember at that point they were like, you can open your eyes now. And I was like, oh yeah, it's over. Like I was so like in the zone. I just didn't even, it was just funny. But he came out and he was perfect and he was fine. Even with all the cords wrapped around him, he was not purple. He could breathe. He didn't have any issues. They were able to put him on me immediately and I had some like chest to chest time with him and I was so relieved. I mean, I was so relieved it was over. I was so relieved he was fine. He was adorable. I remember being worried that like, this sounds like vain, but I remember being worried that I would have like an ugly baby or like, especially like when you're the firstborn, you know, you always hear newborns are like slimy and bruised and whatever. And I don't know, maybe I'm biased, but I feel like he was perfect from birth. I'll insert some pictures so you guys can see what he looked like when he was first born, but he was precious and perfect, and he was way smaller than they anticipated. They kept telling me I was gonna have a huge like 8-9 pound baby, and he ended up only being like 6 pounds. So he ended up not being that big, but he was born around 3:30 in the afternoon, and he was fine, great. We were fine. I did end up having a 2nd-degree tear. I'm pretty sure it happened when I told you I felt like their hands were splitting me open. I feel like that's probably when it happened. But I was also just pushing so hard. So, I mean, there's no telling. But I ended up having a 2nd-degree tear, so I did have to get some stitches. But if you're worried about like tearing and stuff, you don't feel it really. Like you don't it's not like you feel yourself ripping. You know, when you're in that moment in childbirth, like you don't even know. And like afterwards stitching me up, like the only thing I felt was I'd feel when she would tighten the stitches, but like other than that, like you're just, so much else is going on. You're not even concerned about it. I remember they didn't have, because I didn't want to be hooked up to anything, I just had like an IV like opening on me that they were able to like hook another IV to, but it wasn't actually attached to anything. And the plan was they were going to use that to give me, so I think it was like some vitamin K or whatever, or some medicine to help me not like bleed out, because usually redheads bleed a lot. And I remember like for whatever reason it had come loose when I was laboring, so they weren't able to use it. So right after birth I was bleeding a lot, and they did have to give me some vitamin K shots in my legs to help my blood clot and so I wouldn't bleed out. But other than that, my birth was pretty uncomplicated. I was really proud of myself. I had a huge high like right after birth of just like wow, I did it. Like I had a natural childbirth just like I wanted. Like I didn't cave, I didn't get anything else. So I was very proud of myself. And again, that's just what I personally wanted to experience. That's what I wanted. I don't think there's anything wrong with people getting epidurals or having C-sections or whatever else people choose to have. You know, however you choose to have your baby is wonderful. But for me, that's what I really wanted. So I was very excited that I was able to do that. So that is my birthing story. So just to know that things don't always go to plan. You know, having a really good nurse really makes a big difference. And, you know, having some of those tools ready in case you do want them, you know, that birthing meditation I had downloaded just in case, and that actually really helped early on in labor. having some different positions and things you might want to try in case, one thing doesn't work out like you hoped. In my experience, you kind of just figure out like what your body tolerates the best. And everybody births differently too. If my water hadn't broken, maybe I would have ended up, laboring in the water or whatever, doing some other things if the contractions hadn't suddenly gotten so intense so fast. My birth might have looked very, very different. But that is my story. That is how my son came into this world. If you have any questions, definitely leave them in the comments below. And if you're interested in hearing kind of more about like my journey through pregnancy and fertility and all of that, I would definitely love to make that content for you guys if you're interested. And I will see you guys in my next video. Give this video a thumbs up if you liked it.